Welcome to another share on tilapia. Welcome to my channel. My name is Raleigh and I deal with ornamental fish keeping, fish care, breeding, keeping and trading in Jamaica. Today I'm talking about a Jamaican context, a Jamaican national discussion, and that discussion is on tilapia fish farming in Jamaica. Now last week Sunday I did a video piece where in which I shared different critique of both agreeing to and disagreeing in, and putting forward plausible, workable, practical way forward as far as enhancing tilapia fish farming in Jamaica. This was based on the Minister of Agriculture, Fishing and Mining in Jamaica sectoral debate 2026-2027. Today I share a bit of information, I would say, critiquing, delving deep into the presentation of the opposition spokesperson for agriculture, Dr. Dayton Campbell. Alright, so the response is necessary because it's not a political stance. It's neither for one party or the next, and for Jamaica. All right, now beyond the pond, this is beyond the pond a data driven analysis of Jamaica's strategy and the 2026-2027 agricultural debate counter proposal. Right, this is what was presented. Now today we delve into an analytical examination of one of the most critical drivers of Jamaica's economic independence and food security. Now our agricultural sector, that is one of the driving force of food sustainability, right guys? Specifically, we are looking at the 2026-2027 sectoral debate presentation, balancing the policies put forward by Minister of Agriculture, Fishing and Mining, Honorable Floyd Green, against the counter proposal articulated by the opposition spokesperson on agriculture, Dr. Dayton Campbell. Note that this presentation, this analytics, is for sectoral debate 2026-2027. However, guys, if sections of this presentation is not carried through by the minister or the Ministry of Agriculture and Fishing and Mining during this calendar year, I call it now budget cycle, it is hoped that some of these ideas, these critiques, these analysis will carry forward into other budgetary years, and that it will be eventually carried forward. Alright, so this analysis is not framed around political alignment, as I shared before. Instead, it is approached as a matter of urgent national interest. Right, agriculture and fisheries are fundamental to our we call it macroeconomic stability and our rural livelihoods and our gross domestic product. And a lot of persons tend to forget that, the GDP, right? The macroeconomic reality. Now, to understand the weight of this presentation, we must first establish the current economic baseline for the 2026-2027 fiscal year. Now, Jamaica is currently navigating a highly volatile global landscape. The food import bill, let's look at that. Now, recent data highlights that our annual food import bill has escalated to an unprecedented $1.46 billion, right guys? Now the trade imbalance. Now let's look at the trade imbalance. Now Dr. Dayton Campbell rightly pointed out a stark, uncomfortable metric that Jamaica currently spends roughly $5 on food imports for every $1 earned, right? So there's an imbalance between what we earn and what we actually the reverse, right, from agricultural export. Alright, so let's look at climate disruptions. Now the sector is recovering from external shocks. External shock that is more recent is Hurricane Melissa, right, which severely damaged domestic fruit trees, livestock, infrastructure, and traditional cash crops, right? And we are looking at macroeconomic, right? In response to this, Minister Floyd Green presented a budget heavily focused on protected agriculture, anchoring the government strategies around an $800 million greenhouse expansion to build 95 climate resilient structure across 4 parishes, right? Number 2, 145 million drought mitigation scheme, featuring mini water storage system. Now, the drafting of a comprehensive 10-year national agricultural development plan to mobilize private capital is also on the agenda. Now, however, the opposition counter-proposal argues that while these infrastructure allocations are necessary, they treat symptoms rather than the underlying disease of import dependency. Now, the cornerstone of the opposition counter strategy focuses on aggressive targeted import substitution, most notably an accelerated commercial expansion of domestic agriculture, and specifically to the or to interest in which I'm in, tilapia production. Now, our task today is to look beyond the political rhetoric. We will critically evaluate the framework of this tilapia proposal, give kudos where economic logic is sound, and rigorous critique the structural, I call it fiscal, and biological blind spot that could impact Jamaica's economic growth and GDP, both in the near future, in now, and in the far future, right, guys? Analyzing the tilapia counter proposal, the merits. Now, let us first examine why the focus on tilapia production within the opposition counter proposal carries distinct merit and demands serious consideration from the technocrats' standpoint. Now, import substitution and foreign exchange preservation. Jamaica's import thousands of metric tons of chilled and frozen fish annually to satisfy both the domestic consumption as well as hospitality section. Now, tilapia represents a highly controllable, fast-growing, biological, efficient source of animal protein. From a GDP perspective, every metric ton of fish produced locally instead of imported shift money from the net imports. Negative column directly into the domestic output. Positive column of our national accounting. By scaling agriculture, we directly protect our foreign exchange reserve, lowering the demands for US dollars and easing the pressure on the Jamaican dollar. Alright, so microeconomics and multiplication and rural employment. Now, unlike large-scale traditional crop farming, which requires extensive geographic footprints, aquaculture boasts a high yield to space ratio. Expanding tilapia production allows for the utilization of marginal, non-arable lands such as parts of St. Elizabeth, Clarendon, St. Catherine, I'm trying to remember the rest of them, where traditional crops cultivation may not be viable due to soil salinity or poor quality. Also, water issues, drought, right? This creates a decentralized economic multiplier effect. Now, primary jobs, farm laborers, pond technicians, hatcheries operators. Secondary job, processing plant workers, cold storage logistic providers, and distribution network. This, to me, address the rural underdevelopment, boosting household disposable income, which in turn stimulates local commerce and indirect tax revenue for the state. Now, food security amidst climate volatility. Now, Minister Green's presentation placed a massive emphasis on greenhouse to combat climate change. However, aquaculture offers a different kind of resilience. Controlling recirculatory aquaculture system, the RAS system, or properly engineered biofloc ponds are less vulnerable to immediate topsoil erosion and wind damage that devastates open field farm farming during extreme weather we call it events. Now, by diversifying our national food portfolio to include like heavily structured agriculture, aquaculture pillars, the country creates a more, I call it, stable, predictable domestic food supply, shielding the domestic inflation rate, the CPI, from wild spikes when hurricane wipe out vegetable crops. Now, a rigorous critique of the opposition framework, guys. Now, while the macroeconomics concept of scaling tilapia production is highly commendable, a policy cannot survive on intent alone. It requires a viable structural framework. A critical non-partisan analysis of the opposition presentation reveals several deep operational, logistical, and economical missing links that must be addressed before this proposal can be deemed what I refer to as scalable. Now, the energy and input cost conundrum. Now, the glaring omission in the counter proposal is a realistic solution to Jamaica's structural cost of production. Now, tilapia farming is heavily dependent on two primary inputs: electrical energy for water pumping, aeration, and temperature control, and formulated feeds. And this is something that I've always been sharing throughout my channel and my channel share, right? The energy barrier. Now, Jamaica's commercial electricity tariff remains among the highest in the Caribbean. If the framework relies on intensive, high-yield, recirculative agricultural system, the RAS system, to maximize output, the utility cost alone could render local tilapia more expensive per pound than cheap, subsidized imported white fish from South Asia. Okay, so as you all know, subsidized white fish from Asia is being used so as to compensate for the shortfall of locally produced protein, animal protein, right? The feed crisis. Dr. Dayton Campbell briefly mentioned strengthening local feed production using domestic ingredients like cassava and sorghum, right? However, commercial tilapia feed requires specific high protein formulation, often utilizing imported soybeans, right, and fish meal, without an established large-scale domestic processing plant capable of producing high efficiency floating pellets at scale, or tilapia industry would simply swap a fish import dependency for a feed import dependency. In other words, you're actually swapping the importation of fish from overseas to the importation of fish feed from overseas to do the same work. So it's like you're not really, managing economically well. It makes little sense, right? Capital expenditure and capex versus fiscal space. Now, to move tilapia production from small backyard ventures into macro contributor to the GDP requires massive capital investment. Hatcheries must be modernized to produce high quality monosex, all male, that is, fingerlings, to ensure fast growth rates and prevent overpopulation in ponds. Right now, the government is spending over $200 million to do some work on the hatchery in Twickenham Park, improving, or should I say, increasing the fry production rate from 5 million per year to 13 million. Right, it takes a lot of maneuvering of the fiscal space so as to achieve this. Now, the question that the opposition counter-propose failed to answer comprehensively is how this framework is funded, how the proposal that they are making will be funded, bearing in mind the fiscal space and the capex as shared by the finance minister in the opening presentation, and also in the debate as to revenues and expenditure. Now, with the 2026-2027 budget already tightened by fiscal constraint, debt services obligation, the necessity of funding the 18 billion revenue measures outlined by the Ministry of Finance The government cannot simply just grant unlimited subsidy to aquaculture, right? If the proposal relies entirely on private sector investment, the current framework lacks the specific fiscal incentives, de-risking mechanism, or what we refer to as low interest agricultural loans um, structure needed to convince conservative financial institutions to deploy capital into aquaculture. um, let's look at consumer perception and market dynamics. Now, we must also analyze the market reality, right? Historically, Jamaican consumers have demonstrated a cultural preference for marine caught fish like snapper and jack over freshwater pond-raised species. For tilapia to have the impact on GDP meaningfully, it must penetrate both the local household market and high value tourism sector. Now, the counter proposal lacks a clear blueprint for one, cold chain infrastructure development, two, value added processing such as filleting, vacuum packing, and flash freezing. Also, public education campaign to shift consumer habit, and I have been trying to do that over the past couple of years, but persons are still hitting back against the whole consumption of tilapia. Without these components, an artificial boost in production will result in a domestic market glut, crashing prices, bankrupting small farmers, and creating non-performing loans within the credit unions. Now, I believe that although regulations are needed, but more help is needed so as to get those who are serious about tilapia fish farming on stream and in a structured manner. Now, economic implication for GDP and growth, right? To ground this discussion in national interest, we must evaluate the net impact of these competing aquaculture philosophy on Jamaica's macroeconomic parameters, right, guys? Let us look at how an integrated approach combining the minister's infrastructure plan with a refined version of the opposition aquaculture focus affects these variables. Now, let us look at the economic variables. Now, Minister Green plan of a greenhouse agro park, and opposition tilapia counter proposal and combined strategic impact. Now, as far as the imports are concerned, moderate reduction in vegetable, legumes, and import that would be substituted with the produce that is the products that are, or should I say, the produce that are grown within the agro parks, right? High potential reduction in seafood and protein imports that would be substituted with the increase in volume of tilapia fish production. And as far as a combined strategic impact, maximum import, if you should look at the overall benefits of this, you'll realize that you have a stabilized um, foreign exchange reserve, in that persons won't be hitting up on the banks, the different banks, for foreign exchange. As a result of there are less demands for foreign exchange, so as to import animal protein from overseas, for example, like in Asia. All right, so you also have the investment and consumption, right? The whole idea of stabilizing prices, being able to include small farmers within the production sector, within agriculture. If everything is combined together, you'll find that you will have a unified approach in the growth of the economic sector supported by agriculture. All right, the real GDP growth impact. Now, if the country execute a purely infrastructure heavy budget as proposed by the government, our GDP growth remain incremental, should I say, and because we are primarily protecting our existing production rather than creating new industry, right? conversely, if we introduce a structured, sound aquaculture policy as championed by the opposition, we are introducing an entire new economic engine, right? There's a problem with that. By producing tilapia at a volume that replaces $50 million of import seafood, we don't just we don't just subtract millions of dollars in our GDP equation. We expand our industrial output, boost the manufacturing sector through fish processing, and opening future pathways for CARICOM export. But there is some issues with that, because not all Caribbean countries within CARICOM will accept our produce, and that is still an ongoing issue. Right? However, we must issue a strong warning regarding fiscal sustainability. Now, if the state that is Jamaica, right, attempts to drive this tilapia expansion through direct unhinged budgetary spending, spending millions of dollars without addressing structural energy reform, it will widen our fiscal deficit. This could require additional tax revenues or increased public debt, which would counterproductively suppress overall economic growth. So it would typically means little or no sense in doing so. Alright. Therefore, the growth potential for the opposition proposal is entirely contingent on its execution model. Now, it is, it must be a private sector led and public sector enabled process, right? As far as the opposition thought processes on this, right? Conclusion and the way forward. In conclusion, the presentation by the opposition spokesperson on agriculture, Dr. Dayton Campbell, provides a vital, necessary challenge to the status quo. It correctly shifts the national conversation towards aggressive import substitution and highlights the aquaculture as an underutilized pillar of national development. Kudos must be extended to the opposition for emphasizing that true metric agricultural success is a deliberate reduction of our unsustainable 1.6 billion food import bill. However, as an analytic critique of the board presentation, right, the proposal cannot remain a mere list of targets. For it to serve national interests, it must be integrated into the Ministry of Agriculture broader long-term framework, such as upcoming 10-year national agriculture, development plan mentioned by Minister Floyd Green. The path forward for Jamaica requires a synthesis between both perspectives. Right now, I believe, this is my belief, right, guys, that we should adopt the opposition focus on aquaculture, but anchor it into the government's climate resilient framework, use as a portion of the $50 million Green Climate Fund, adopt Jamaica project to research and deploy solar powered aeration system for aquaculture, effectively neutralizing the high energy costs that threaten the industry. This is another thought from me. I think that if we establish a private-public partnership, PPP, what you find is that we'll be able to fund a centralized modern fish food mill, utilizing local ingredients, creating a complete value chain from hatcheries to processing table. Also, I believe that institutional procurement is of interest, right? Is of importance. Implement Dr. Campbell's suggestion to mandate that publicly funded institutions such as school, hospitals, and military prioritize purchasing Jamaican grown tilapia, providing a guaranteed floor market for our farmers, right? So therefore, the hospital, the persons are in the hospital, they need specific protein. Make it be mandated that the hospital purchases grown tilapia from Jamaica as a protein source for persons in the hospitals, in the school feeding program, in the infirmaries, in the different projects that exist where which meals are provided for persons. in the military, in the police force, as far as barracks training and all that. Let it be that institutionalized procurement of homegrown tilapia, within these spaces. Agriculture should never be a political football, right? The budget and the counter proposal for our leaders must be viewed as a complementary piece of our singular puzzle, right? The quest for, a food secure, economically independent, and resilient Jamaica is necessary. Now, thank you for listening. Let us combine to analyze, critique, and build our nation with objectivity and clear vision. It is hope that this share makes sense to you guys. See you on the next one. Catch you next week Sunday. Bye bye.